Welcome to Cultivated Live for Thursday, July 25th, 2024. I am Jay Rosenthal. I am the co-founder of Cultivated Media, the host of this program, which we like to call Cultivated Live. And since we launched, our goal at Cultivated has been to be cannabis industry first, providing you with the most important, insightful, useful, and timely information every single day. We do it through our daily newsletter, which is Cultivated Daily, but you can find it at cultivated.news. We do that through this daily live stream, which we stream on LinkedIn, so subscribe to us there. We do it on our YouTube channel, so smash the subscribe button there. And today, and on most or all Thursdays, I'm joined by Krista Raymer, the founder and CEO of Vetrina, the foremost cannabis retail consultancy. Krista, it's been 2 weeks. Nice to see you.
Wow, it's like we took a sabbatical.
A sabbatical from each other. But Krista, I was on a road trip
I know,
through,
I'm so excited to talk about it.
I was in New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, sort of my neck of the woods. And I saw some things. And every time I walk into a retail environment, I think of you, any retail environment, but specifically cannabis. And then I ask questions that I think you would ask, at least off the bat. You want to hear sort of
Okay.
where I've been?
I need to know. I want to know so many things, but I want to know what the biggest thing that you noticed from one state to another in terms of what the first promotion you saw in these stores was, outside of just the layout of the store.
Good question. Well, I wasn't there. I wasn't at any of them when they were open. Oh, sorry, that's not true. I was at Panacea in Massachusetts, which is part
Okay.
of the MariMed sort of network. They have a relatively new. They had just celebrated their opening like 3 days before, or like their grand opening. They had a soft opening, and there were like opening day discounts still on
Okay.
offer. But it was also a big celebration. So there was like tents outside. There was like food. I think there was food. Like so that's like an anomaly, I would say,
Yeah,
because
they
it
had
was like
activations
they had
going.
activations and there was lots of flags and like wayfinding because it's not like on a main drag because it's in Massachusetts. Like so that
Okay.
was that's probably an anomaly, although that was great. I know I was in Vermont at something called the Vermont Bud Barn, which is awesome, by the way. And I think they had like daily deals, like like pre-rolls on this day or whatever. And I was at Dank in downtown Buffalo, which is a great shop, by the way. And I didn't see any discounts, but they also weren't open. So that's like I was there before
Okay.
they opened, so it was difficult for me to
Okay.
tell. But at Dank, I was there like 9:30, and they open at 10, and it's in downtown Buffalo, so not far from here, obviously. And people were lining up. They get people who get there ahead of time to get like before the day starts, and
Yeah.
she said they get calls, and we ran the interview this week. They get calls sometimes to stay open a few minutes late after 9 because people are on their way and know they're going to close. So like they are clearly tuned in with their like people feel comfortable
Customer
enough to like
base.
show up early and ask them to stay late, which is a big ask, obviously, because it's a
That's a
12-hour day.
community. That's a community store. Like
It is,
if
and I think
customers are doing that, that's because you feel like the retail environment is part of the community.
yeah, and they very much
Yeah.
are, and they're also downtown. So like, there's a community downtown of people obviously who live there and shop there, and they're right on one of the main drags in downtown Buffalo. And so they're right, conference center is right behind their place. The light rail goes right across the front of their store, and they said they see a huge uptick during Sabres games and during
Okay.
Buffalo Bison's games, which are all within walking distance. So I
Checks
was
out.
asking all the questions about how they cater to that, and then I asked a question about they've been in business a year exactly, almost to the day that I was there. What have they seen in terms of their inventory and sort of flow throughout the year? And
Hmm.
she did say like getting ready for summer this year, huge uptick in beverages, which was good for me because they had a huge heirloom display, and that was my next stop. But sort of a lot of things that you talk about, I'm seeing played out in real time in dispensaries that are open a year. So I learn and then I ask questions about sort of to gut check all those things when I get to a dispensary.
New York is so complicated because I mean, you have a way that the customer is learning about inventory. You have more, I guess, options coming online in terms of product assortment, which naturally kind of improves the product quality as it comes online as well. And then you also have the shift in pricing. And so what inventory looked like a year ago versus what it looks like today in New York are so different, and it will continue to be really different for like at least the next 2 years. And so it's interesting to see because it's like there are trends in other more mature markets, and then you have to look at your own data in your own market to say what things have influenced what information we're looking at, and is it going to repeat this way or is it going to show up in a different way moving forwards?
And they have also, I mean, this is true in all of New York. Since they opened, they were the first card licensee, in my understanding, in Western New York. So anywhere really around them. So they were open first, but there are certainly other shops now. So in addition to everything you just said about inventory and
Yeah.
flow of customers, like there's also more competition, but they were
Mhm.
there first. And that I think has major advantages to serving the community and understand, like they certainly have more data. They had first customers and they are
Yeah.
in a much better sort of a way to attract customers, which is also, I think, a unique challenge, right? They serve their customer base and serve it really well. Those are experienced cannabis consumers that know what they want and they come in. But they
Mhm.
also are a tourist destination and sort of downtown
Yeah.
Buffalo, certainly for the area. And they see a lot of people who this is their first dispensary. And
Yeah.
so, like, they may be cannabis consumers, but this is their first sort of dispensary experience. And they also have people who, for whom this is their first dispensary experience ever, are not cannabis consumers. So there's a lot
Mhm.
going on in a relatively small footprint, to be quite honest, but a great location. And how do you serve that is a learning experience for everybody who works in store, which is what you guys talk about a lot.
Yeah, I guess like within your assortment, how are you splitting your decision around what you're stocking when and at what times of the year, specifically for them with those event venues so close by that services either educated or I wouldn't necessarily label the customer as like newbie because I think that that's a little past its moment, but I would maybe consider convenience-based customers who are like looking for easy to make decisions on product that is easy to consume, doesn't take a lot of tools,
But
as an example. And so, how do they make decisions? And it's two different types of profiles in the way that they shop.
yeah, with if you asked a question, they come in, what brought you in today? You would you
You would
would
have a lot more insights.
you would have a lot of smart insights, and I could just
Yeah.
imagine that question being asked there because, they may obviously it may not be a familiar person coming in, but,
Hmm.
I am going to a Sabres game and I have a 10-minute walk. Like that is a real answer to the question, that
Yeah.
helps you sort of guide, what you would sell that person. But then the next stop was, then I went to sort of two processor manufacturers brands. I went to Heirloom and I went to, Nature, which makes Jaunty products in New York. Both interesting to talk about, which we'll get to at some point down the line. But then I was in Vermont, and I've been I do the drive to Massachusetts a lot, to New Hampshire a lot from Toronto, and I
Hmm.
go by this place called the Vermont Bud Barn all the time. And so I called up, and said, "Can I stop by?" And so Vermont, and also interesting in very unique ways from Dank, they have a barn on the side of the road, obviously on one of the major highways. That is really in quotes because it's a 2-lane road, but in Vermont, and it's right on the side of the road, sort of a big property in a barn. They downtown Brattleboro, Vermont, and they
Okay.
knew they weren't going to be able to open a dispensary in downtown Brattleboro for a variety of reasons, so they moved to this barn. They still have the Hempicurian, which is their hemp store. So CBD
Hmm.
products from Vermont mostly, but also from other places, including smokable products that are hemp derived.
Okay.
That's like the middle of the barn. That's the Hempicurian. Then they have the Vermont Bud Barn, which is their proper dispensary, but also very small. You're going to like one thing I'm going to tell you in a sec. So they have the dispensary. One quick note, their display, apparently in Vermont, one of the rules is you have to put all the cannabis products away at the end of every night back into the vault. But I
Yeah.
think it was the Brattleboro Historical Society was selling, they weren't vitrines because they're not, but they were like display cases, like beautiful antique display cases that went with the barn. And they put coasters on them. So the product's always in there that they can roll away every night. It was super smart and they look beautiful on the sales floor. So there's the dispensary, there's the hemp part of it, and you have to exit those two sort of facilities to get to the next one. Next to that, is like a garden store for home growers. So there's nutrients, soils, those tents that you can put it like inside your house, lights,
Hmm.
and clones they can sell out of there. So like they're capturing
Okay.
sort of a home grow market. And next to that is actually their grow, their grow facility, which is not massive,
Okay.
but is attached to this barn on a beautiful piece of property. Like to me, this is like so Vermont because they're trying to capture sort of be a one-stop shop for everybody, and they have these hemp consumers who've been going to their store for a long time. Um, I loved it. I had so much fun there and could have stayed all day if they would have let me, but they were opening up and wanted to kick me out, which is fine. But it's creative thinking in an environment, in a sort of a regulated environment, which I quite liked.
And what's interesting is like when you were just describing it, I envision something because I haven't seen it. So
Yeah.
I envision it being like small little stores, and it to me feels like a farmer's market almost, like a relative to I think culturally what goes on in Vermont
Yeah.
totally makes sense.
Yes.
We've been spending a lot of time, and I think we've talked about this too before. It's like the average customer makes 8 transactions in a year in your dispensary. I mean, we know that customers are splitting dispensary purchases across multiple stores. So, like, are they really purchasing 8 or are they purchasing more? And then the other consideration of that is it looks like in the data in most places that if you get a customer to 3 visits, they're much more likely to keep purchasing. 5 visits, again, is like another kind of key point in their purchasing, and then 8. And what you've just identified is like where we can share the purchasing and the ability to also see how the customer purchases in what ways. Like, when does somebody make a homegrown purchasing decision in that environment?
Hmm.
How many transactions do they need to make? And then once they have, how does their purchasing change? And like the insights that could come out of an environment like that around how different types of educated customers and like what insights we might be able to derive from the way that they purchase and in what location or sub location within their entire, I guess, address,
Facility. Yeah.
is amazing. Yeah, it
Yeah.
would be very cool.
One of the other things about Vermont is that everything, it can't be plastic. So everything is in glass containers, even like individual
Okay.
pre-rolls, which seems also wasteful in a different way.
Yeah.
But everything does look beautiful because it's not in plastic. So everything is in a glass container, which I think you can only do in Vermont, really in a small place. But it was interesting to see everything in that respect. And then I would say not the opposite of that, but I was in a dispensary in Massachusetts in a Panacea, which is a Maramed facility, which is very Massachusetts. Like rarely in Massachusetts are the dispensaries on like the high street. This was in a more, I would say, industrial or semi-industrial area, but a big facility that has shared purpose as well from cultivation, manufacturing, processing, but also a dispensary. And they were celebrating their grand opening. So it is a beautiful facility. It is brand spanking new, of course. And what I found about Maramed is that like they of course they have a bunch of different brands that do really well. Many of that they've acquired, including Betty's Eddies, which is I think the number one edible in Massachusetts. They have Bubby's Baked, which is like a brownie company. They've also done an ice cream with a Massachusetts based ice cream shop. Like they're actually
Mm-hmm.
leaning into obviously their customer base with familiar brands and familiar formats. But also, you know, they need to service their customers and they know that customers come in for other brands too. So it is this balance of their product array that is their
House
own
brand
brand.
versus third
Yeah.
party.
And they also had a house brand that looked so much like, didn't look like it, but was clearly targeting the value customer that looks so much like No Frills here in Canada. That was like, it wasn't No Frills or No Name, but it was like something like that. I have a picture of it somewhere, but it was really insightful to see sort of how they are putting their array together for customers and how they serve it because they've been in business for a long time. They understand their customers really well. And that is exciting to see in markets that are not certainly new.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the house brand versus third party, it has shifted over time. Like if we look at more mature markets, like what did it look like before versus what does it look like now, and what was the in between? It's really interesting because it's like a really delicate mix and balance of saying where do we show our gross margin, where do we bank our cogs,
Yeah.
and basically influence the way that the product is positioned within an overall assortment. So at the moment that you have a house brand product, you need to then think about what does the customer view as the substitution or the replacement? And
Yeah.
that's like quite complicated because it's not always same product formats for same product format. Um, we could talk about that another
Yeah.
day, but like
And
really there is an overarching assortment decision that needs to happen, not just inventory decisions.
the other thing, and this was right up your alley, their inventory room was
Okay.
like so well organized. Like, and the woman that was inventory manager, I think that's the right position, was like, she didn't even want to see me
Dialed
in.
in.
She didn't want anybody else in there, but it was like, it was dialed. And she was talking about how she color codes some things, formats, and how, like, and really, because it's a high volume store, they also do a lot of delivery and also pickup. So like, you know,
Mhm.
speed is of essence, and it's a big inventory and it's a big inventory room. But then there's also, you know, they have an ice cream, so there's a freezer, right? They have a cooler for beverages. Like it is a it's complicated, right? And sort of
It's like a
how you
store
organize it.
inside of a store.
And we were talking about before we came on, you were at a shop not that long ago where there was a 20 plus minute wait, like getting product, cycling through those customers that are actually buying things is super important. And I was both nerded out and impressed with sort of their operation behind the scenes, even though I don't often see that part of the store, but this was like super, like tons of SKUs, super well organized, pulling it really quickly. And that was nerdy. And I thought you might like that too.
I love it. I mean, I think some of the most effective and efficient stores in an ability to not miss opportunities in terms of like sellouts as well as not miss opportunities with aging inventory is actually to approach the back of house like a store for the team.
Yeah.
And like that you would organize it with that level of care, that you give it like some visibility, because that's often something that is missing from these is like products end up in boxes all often look the same, it's hard to know what's in the box. And so how easy is it to visually scan the environment to be able to reinforce what you're seeing in the data? And then from your perspective of like being able to have product prepared for the customer, and whether that be cooled or frozen in this instance with ice cream, it's like having those parts set up as well as a consideration of inventory is definitely a way to think about servicing the team, and that back of house as a store for the team in that everything is ready to go. Yeah.
One other note about their ice cream, which they do with Emac and Bolio, which doesn't mean anything to you, but in Massachusetts, that is like it's sort of like Baskin Robbins, I would say,
Okay.
with probably better ice cream. Sorry, Baskin Robbins, but I'm from Massachusetts. I have to say that.
You're biased.
But so the ice cream is their brand, and when it's in other stores, there's a branded cooler, which certainly a branded freezer, which makes sense, and there's a branded like freezer bag, like we know one of those silver bags that you put it in that has a spoon as well. So when you get it, you get the ice cream, you get the spoon, and you get the branded bag that goes no matter where you're getting this ice cream. And it seemed like while it's not an inexpensive product, obviously, but it is so unique and novelty and certainly seasonal and comes branded, and the bag is fun to reuse because it's a freezer bag, like not a freezer bag like Zip, but like it's a cold bag. And the spoon in it, is, emblematic of sort of the brand overall. So it was a cool product, and it got left in Massachusetts as they all did, but it was fun to eat and delicious. So
with a product like that, it's like, what is the intention of a product? And sometimes something like that is an ability to add a product to a transaction. It's completely impulsive. It's going to very rarely be the reason that you're going to the store, unless maybe you've already had the experience with it. And the seasonality of it is quite intense. I mean, we saw the same thing with freezies in like across Canada, was it 2 summers ago? And the difficulty with those was often that the product wasn't prepared. So I think if you're going down a path of thinking about seasonal products like an ice cream, it has to be prepared for consumption for it really to be able to work.
As opposed to buy it not cold and freeze it.
Yeah.
Krista, I always like talking to you. I also want to talk to you, not today, but I do want to talk to you about brand extensions, because that has been interesting both for, like the Panacea model, but also for what I learned at Heirloom and at Jaunty, which is Nature in New York. Like, it was interesting to see what they were doing with finding brands that work with customers and with stores, and then diving deep into those. It's a pretty instructive thing happening in New York. But I also, and this is sort of the overall vibe, especially in New York, like I feel like there's a sense, and not that I have an expansive knowledge of it, but like there's a sense that they are entering sort of the 2.0. Right. There's way more stores opened up. There's way more products on shelves. There's enforcement on a sort of illicit or unregulated sales, and like all those things pieced together to build some momentum, which I think is exciting from a New York perspective, but also for the industry overall.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that there's different momentum happening today. Like the first stores that were open had a certain level of momentum just because of they were the first and didn't have any competition, but like there is a new expectation for the quality of what happens within those environments for sure.
So those watching along, we'll be releasing this this week. I think tomorrow we'll release the Heirloom one. It's actually going to be a 2-parter. One is the tour, one is a conversation with the president of Heirloom, and then we'll get to Jaunty and Nature, and then we'll get to Panacea, the Vermont Bud Barn, all of it. It's like so much to put together, but it was super fun. I'm glad I got to talk to you about it. Next time, maybe we'll do it all together. We'll visit all the dispensaries in New York. We'll do it over the course of that would be way too much, but maybe one per region or something. Krista, it's always good to see you, and we'll connect with you next week.
Really nice to see you too, Jay.
Thanks, everybody. This has been Cultivated Live. We do this every day at 10 a.m. Eastern. To find out everything else we do, find us on cultivated.news. Follow us on LinkedIn. Smash the subscribe button on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow, which is Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern. Buy cannabis at your local dispensary, and if you're in downtown Buffalo or West Brattleboro, Vermont, or Quincy, Massachusetts, I just named the ones you should go. Buy Vermont Bud Barn, Panacea, and Dank. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.